All right, we're back. It is COMP1073. That's client-side scripting at Georgian in the winter 2017 semester, and it's week 5, part 1 of our broadcast. Today, we're going to talk about a couple things. One, I've put up a little lab 2 that's up on Blackboard for assignment 2, checkpoint. I want to know if you guys started, all right? So if you haven't started, now's the day to start. I'm looking for 2 things: a zip archive of your project files and your GitHub link. It has to be a new GitHub link. Remember, I told you don't keep running it off of the previous assignment, right? So assignment 2 should have its own GitHub repository, not the same one. So that's what I'm looking for this one. So I want that link, and I want your a zip archive of whatever you have today. What I'm looking for really is that you've started, to kind of put things together. You may have not finished yet. You may not have anything else, but your previous, it could be just a copy of what your assignment 2 was, or assignment 1 was, and all you're doing is you're adding to it, but you're, the page that you're making, remember you're making this, you're updating the contact page, right? That's what this thing is all about, and the contact page should return data, right? So we're going to go over some of that stuff from last week. We're going to start from there, but it's due by tonight. Now, if you finished, what if you finished your assignment? Assignment 2 is done, right? If assignment 2 is done, just give me it again. Give it to me in here, the link for assignment 2, and then you're going to get an easy 2% bonus for nothing, right? So that's good. If you haven't started assignment 2, this is a good payment. I'm paying you again to start, right? So, same thing. Just put up your project files, zip archive of your project files, and your GitHub link, and you're good to go if you're finished. So if you finished assignment 2, fantastic. This is a real easy assignment, right? So that means you're just going to get an extra 2% bonus on top of everything else, right? Now, remember, I'm giving you bonuses because it's going to balance off certain things that happen throughout the semester. And also, it's kind of a participation mark thing where, I can't take away stuff. Some people have legitimate reasons why they can't be here, but I can give bonuses for those people who do make it in. All right, so that's the lab 2. Today, we're starting up something we've already talked about, basically events, okay? So before we start going there with events and event handling, sorry, I'm just going to put these files away because I don't want to keep a messy desktop. Although, there is some proof that having a messy desktop is actually the best way of sorting things, believe it or not. Let's go to what we're doing here. And why am I not seeing your stuff? Oh, there it is. So again, what we want to do is we want to copy this, and we're going to duplicate this project. I kind of do this every single time. So just like we just go off the last one, right? So this is lesson 5. But we need to do something here. And I was just saying, I don't know about some of you who are using Macs, but my Mac, when I updated, I kind of downloaded the last update, kind of screwed me up. I don't know why, for whatever reason, but my node unlinked, right? So I couldn't do any kind of npm install anything, which is kind of weird, and Git started to fire up weird. So I fixed all that, but just in case you have issues, sometimes that happens. Okay, cool. So let's get rid of, we'll remove my .git folder, right, with -rf. Be careful of that one. Switch, again, if you're a Windows user, right-click and delete the hidden .git folder where your repo lives. I think you guys know that by now. And I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to say, before I do that, what I want to do is I want to go into VS Code, and with VS Code, what I want to do is drag and drop my project files, here we go, like this, and modify some stuff, right? Because I don't want to just start from scratch here. Notice that I have these little icons here. This is an extension for VS Code, VS icons, that's what they're called. A neat little extension that gives you kind of an idea of what each of the files are. Now, let's talk about this for a second. I've got my index.html, and it says something to do with my home screen. This is good. So I've kind of modified all this so it works my portfolio. And I have my projects page. We left off this, where we have projects and contacts, so 3 different pages, but only one script that controls them all, app, right? And what we talked about last week was a closure, this idea of a function. We talked about functions at length last week, all about things like functions within functions, closures, the variable scope, all that stuff we talked about last week. So if you haven't seen that lecture, if you couldn't attend, please see the videos. I did a little study about the videos lately, and it looks like students are watching them, but they only watch, out of an hour's worth of production, 8 to 10 minutes, right? That's the average length of time. So what you're actually doing, what the videos are telling me, the analysis is saying that for the average person, they zone in on where they have to, the information they're missing, they watch that little part, or they fast forward, and then they get out. They don't watch the whole thing, which makes sense. And it's not for that. My videos aren't for you to watch the whole lecture yet again, and that's why you're here in lecture, right? They're also for people that can't make it to class for whatever reason. People have issues coming to class, they're gonna miss, there's an ice storm, they live in Aurelia or someplace crazy, and you know, they want to watch remotely, and that's fine. Okay, so so we talked about all this stuff, which is really important because we're going to cover all this stuff from now on. I'm always going to use an IFE. Remember what an IFE stands for? An immediately invoked function expression, right? Invoke means called, you know, or, you know, basically what you're in, you know, making it function, making it go. I've also talked about things like a return statement inside the IFE, which actually returns this object. And we haven't talked about objects yet, but we will. But I want you to think about returning data outside of this closure. That's all we're doing here. Now, you don't have to understand all this right now. The only thing I care about is, do you know how to retrieve data from the page? That's what your assignment 1 was. Do you know how to, you know, or sorry, assignment was push data to the page. Assignment 2 is get data from the page. If you can do those 2 things, then your midterm should be fine. All right, there shouldn't be any challenges on the midterm whatsoever. Remember, not next week, but the week after, we will have a midterm test that's going to run for the class, right? That's what we're going to do. Be ready to, you will be generating some kind of, or doing, there's a little website you're going to have to be, you know, you're going to work with. You're going to create a little website. It's going to be in class. It's almost like an in-class assignment that is individual. You can't talk to anybody else, although it will be open book, right? So that's something you can do. And then you're going to, you know, basically during the test, you'll be building something that I'm going to give you something to build on, right, or modify. And then it should be fairly straightforward, things that you've already kind of done, right? So if you've followed, if you've been in class, you should be fine. For people who haven't been in class or who've missed, you know, those kind of things, then, you know, it might be challenging for you, but it's fairly straightforward, yes. Yeah, next week is week 6, so week 7 will be when the test is. And then officially our week 8 won't start until after the break. The break runs from February 26th, I think it is, until March 4th or March 3rd. 4th, right? And then we're back on, right? So that whole week. So that's what this is. Let me take a look at some things I have to change for this little assignment or this little project. Well, it's not lesson 4 anymore, it's lesson 5. So that's got to change, right? So I'm just changing my Bower and my you know, it's kind of the files I need to change, right? These things can all stay the same. This is going to say lesson 5, right? We have a README file here as well, and the README file says README test. We did a couple of tests here, and I'm going to change this to say, you know, demo project for lesson 5. That's what we'll put in a little differently now. And this project is going to cover, you know, if I do demo project for lesson 5, notice I'm using Markdown. Markdown is like markup, except it's different syntax. So the default is, when you look at an MD file, .md, that a single hash is like a H1 tag, a double hash is like an H2 tag, right? And then what you can do is you can actually add additional things. So for example, I can give you instructions like, or more about lesson 5, which is interacting with interacting with user events. That's what really this is about, this project. So that's lesson 5. And I want to save this as well. So, you know, these are things we're updating. And I'm doing this before I put my project up on GitHub and Microsoft Azure, okay? So that's it for this one. So I'm going to X out of this, the preview, and I'm going to kind of leave this one and my bower.json. And now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to go back to command line. You can obviously do it from here too. Notice that if you have everything initialized properly, I haven't shown you how to do this from scratch yet, but for most things, you can initialize everything through the Git integration in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. The only thing you cannot do here is you cannot set up a remote yet, and they haven't done that. They haven't set up. They haven't kind of given you a way of doing everything in here. Although I'm sure it's not that difficult. So if I click initialize Git repository, it initializes. I have all these files, 292 files. I'm going to stage them all. This is like, so the first one was like git init, what I just did. And now this is like git add dot. When I click this button, so they're all added. These are A's for add. And then I'm going to say a commit. Here's my commit. I'm going to say initial commit, right? And then click this check mark, right? That's like saying git commit minus m initial commit, right? Now I can't push, right? There is no ability for me to push or set up a remote. So I can't do that. It's one thing I can't do. I have to do that locally here, right? So if I do an ls, you can see that I'm on master, branch master. If I clear, I want to set up a remote, and my remote's going to be something I need to create. So it's up on GitHub. Question: do you think that GitHub will be on your exam? Any kind of Git or GitHub?
No, why?
We've only been hammering at it every single week, so that's definitely something you should expect on the exam. Knowing how to go up on Git and going live somewhere. All right. Just FYI, there will be a live component to it. So that means that you need some kind of provider that you can put your stuff up on. Any provider that you use for your assignment is fine. It doesn't have to be Azure. It doesn't have to be Heroku. It could be anything, right? Whatever you want, but as long as it's live. So if I go to that site and check out the live link, it should work, right? So get it done early. You got 2 weeks to figure that out, right? If you haven't figured out how to do that yet. And if you haven't, that means you've lost marks on your assignment number 1, and you're going to lose marks on assignment number 2. All right, so I need to set up a new repository here, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on new, and we're going to call this COMP1073. Again, winter 2017 and lesson 5. That's this one. So this is accompanying the video. I always try and make a Git repository for this technical video. Now, remember, I've always copied and pasted, right? I've copied and pasted these last 2 things to connect to Git or GitHub, but I'm going to do things remotely and try and guess what I need, right? So I know what my Git repository is called. It's right here, right? And let's see if I can do this by hand, like, just set up the remote. And it's easy. It's git remote add, right? And then I need to name the remote origin. That's the name of the remote. Remote means the connection. I'm naming a connection to GitHub. That's the name of the connection, right? And then the connection itself. So it's got to be HTTPS, like I see up there. So https://github.com/Georgian College. That's my, in this case, my organization, /COMP1073, winter 2017-lesson 5, and then .git. So that's the remote. And if I did it correctly, if I click enter or press enter, I've added the remote, right? Then I can do git push -u for unconditional to the origin branch, or the origin connection, master branch. And then what that does is if you've set up your GitHub or Git locally properly, it won't ask you to log in. If it does, it's okay. Just log in. Sometimes you have to do that, and then it'll push everything up to GitHub. I want to test that out, so I'm going to go to GitHub now and make sure I went to the right place. I click on code, and I can see that I've got 1 commit with here's my project files, and there's my little README file with the markdown. Guys, I can hear you. It's really loud. It's acoustics in this room. It's really weird. All right, so so this is the lesson and whatever, and this is where I've been. If you wanted to start with me, if somehow you didn't have a good start last time, you can always grab my files, or if you're watching the videos, you want to practice on your own at home, you can certainly grab my files and work with me from here. Okay. Next step, I want to put it up on Microsoft Azure, right? Remember, I talked about all these steps. So imagine you're on your exam. I need some project files. I'm going to probably create some kind of duplicate. I'm going to give you some project files. You're going to make your own version, right? You're going to keep the original. So you're going to download them from Blackboard. You're going to have the original files. You're going to rename them, right? They're not going to have a Git repository inside of them at all. I'll let you do all that, right? And then what's going to happen here is I need to connect to some kind of live service. I'm using, my service of choice is Microsoft Azure. You can use whatever service you like. So I'm going to go to portal.azure.com. And now remember, there's a limit to how many projects you can have live on Azure that take space. And I think there's a 50 gigabyte limit. Sorry, let me take that back. 50 megabyte limit, right? Which is small. It's very, very small. And I've got a bunch of projects already here. I have COMP1073 winter 2017 from last week, if I'm not wrong. Lesson 3A, that's like 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to kill this one. And the way to kill this one, if I have a previous project and I don't want to continue with this one, is just click delete. All right, so COMP1073, bye-bye. And that's gone. Now it'll take a second for this thing to delete, and it'll take you back to your dashboard. You see that this is deleted. We can remove it from the dashboard. You can also move your dashboard around, like if it seems busy or whatever, you can just kind of move it around. So I want this one over here. You know, I can kind of drag and drop. Azure allows you to do this kind of stuff. I have a database here. I have another thing from last week, you know, for another class, and I have yet another one for another class. So I've got a few of them that I'm using, but that's okay. I'm done customizing. I need a new one, right? Because I'm making a new file for today. So I'm going to go plus new. I'm going to go web and mobile, right? I'm going to click on web app. These are all steps we've taken before, and you've watched me do a number of times. Now it should say for you either DreamSpark or Imagine. That's the link here. Again, if you're using a local provider someplace or a school provider or something like that, that's totally fine. You don't have to use a cloud provider, but I recommend it. I think it's good practice if you can hook yourself up. And then, you know, the name of your website. So my website is going to be called COMP1073-Winter 2017-Lesson 5. And if it's not taken, I'll get a check. A resource group, which is going to be something I've created, Canada East. Right? Here's my service plan. I'm going to choose Canada East. There we go. Click Pin to Dashboard and click Create. If everything goes well, it should create my or deploy my application. So it's deploying over here. And then when it's done deploying, it's going to take me back to the properties page here on Azure. And again, this is what I'm doing here for those people who are not new to Azure. I'm really giving this a glancing blow. This is really high level. Like, I'm not really doing deep stuff with Azure. This is just creating a space on Azure for a website, and away we go. Yay, we created the space. Fantastic. Now, again, question for you is, if I was to go here, right, to this link, would I see anything right now? Yes. What would I see? The beautiful default thing. The default blue page that says, thank you for creating an app. That's all it's going to say. It's not going to be my app, even though I've named it the same, because I need to make a connection, right? That's the next step. The next step is I have to go, you know, as an example, down to my deployment options. Here's my deployment options down here underneath where it says app deployment on the left sidebar, right? You can see there's a deployment options link. Here, it's going to tell me, hey, choose your source. What's my source? And this is where I'm going to choose GitHub, right? Now, you can also use Bitbucket. I'm not going to stop you from doing that if you're a Bitbucket person, but GitHub is my cloud provider for repositories, right, that I'm using. Authorization, that's me, right? And my organization is not going to be me, my name. It's going to be under Georgian College, right, because that's my organization that I'm using. Yours would just be probably your account, unless you made an organization for yourself as well. I'm going to choose my project that I'm using. Notice that there are several projects here on Georgian, but I'm going to choose the last one, which is COMP1073, you know, from today. There it is. Usually the last one will be on the top. I don't care about performance testing. I want to keep it on the master branch. I'm going to click OK to continue. So OK, this is going to basically what it's going to take stuff from GitHub, the thing we just put there, as long as everything is OK with GitHub, and we're assuming things are OK, right? We don't know yet. And I want to transfer everything to Azure. There's a container that this process that I just went through, it creates a container for Azure, like an empty container, a place where your site is going to be hosted. And then when we connect it with my deployment options here, what it's going to do is it's going to transfer stuff from GitHub to Azure. And then Azure is going to be, it creates a hook. It's what's called a hook with GitHub. And GitHub will push to Azure whenever there's a change. Okay, that's what happens. So GitHub will automatically push. This is called continuous integration, when my site gets updated every time GitHub gets updated. And that's the process. Okay? How's that?
It feels like it updates every 5 minutes. Something like this.
No, it should update immediately or very close to. So it means that you probably, you know, it doesn't take 5 minutes usually. All right, even though I've got a check mark, I should really still check to see if things are working before I can progress. I'm going to click Overview, right? And on the right, you see a link for my site, and I click onto it, and let's see if it works. Oh, I have a problem with it. I knew this was going to happen because you had a problem with it, right? And I talked last week about web config as something you have to modify if you want to use Font Awesome, right? However, we didn't have a chance to test it last week, and I knew it after I tested it. I was like, something's wrong. Something's wrong. So web config, the problem with it is we've included only part of it. So if you look down here under web config, there's only this system web server piece. That's not correct, right? If you want to look at a web config, a proper web config, right? And again, we want to show these files. Again, let's do another Stack Overflow search, right? So I'm going to do web config. Got to fix that. I know this is the problem. So I'm going to say web config, and then we'll say font awesome, right? So font awesome does not work when served by IIS. This is the issue we talked about last week. And the reason why, and this is just this little piece here. So it doesn't say that. It says, hey, add this to the web config. It doesn't say this is the web config. And we were quick to just to copy this and say, yay, we got a solution. Run away, run away. It wasn't the solution, right? It was only one part of the solution. What we need to do is actually get the other pieces to web config. And sometimes they'll list everything you need. Okay, now it says, add WAF to the pattern. This is another option for iOS 7. Let's keep going down here for other things. Font awesome, fonts, MIME types, and IIS and other servers. This is January of last year. The guy talks about what you need, how to make it run, right? He talks about MIME types. He goes in detail. Static system web server in your web config. Again, similar to what we've done before, right? Here's what we've done before. Why bother? Performance, but again, it's incomplete. System.web server is not enough. Like if I go here, system.web server is not enough. You need to surround this with configuration, right? We'll keep going and see until we find one that's complete. This is not complete. Getting started with fixing font awesome on ASP.NET. Okay, that's another one. All right, see, hopefully they'll have one that's complete. No, they just do the same thing. Arg. What they did do is they do one thing that's extra. They remove the file extension and then they put it back in as a MIME map. And that's something that we don't have on ours, right? So which is actually better to do. So here where it says MIME map, we have to remove the file extension, right? WAF, and then do the same thing for WAF2. It's just a web font, right? WAF2. So that's one thing that we have to do. But we need to surround this. And one of the ways to do this, if you have Visual Studio, and I do, I can run in VMware, with VMware, I can run Visual Studio. Here's Visual Studio, right? And again, the fix, of course, would be just to not use web config. Don't use web config, and everything's fine, right? But that doesn't really solve it. I'll show you why. So if I run Visual Studio in a VM for a second, and I'll pull this up. It'll take me a second. Nice to have 16 gigabytes of RAM and an SSD. That helps, right? Sometimes it seems slow, but believe me, if you try it, it's going to be a little bit slower. It might be a little bit slower for you. May not. Maybe it's going to be faster than mine. I don't know. But I'm just going to kind of kill this. Actually, I won't. Let's close this off. I'll close the solution. Yeah, sure, I'll save. And what I'll do is I'll go File, New Project. And when I do a website with Visual Studio, this is one thing that I can do with it. I can look for a blank website. So if I go Web, it's ASP.NET Web Application. That's the one I want. And I'm just going to make a blank website. So Web Application 3. I don't need a Git repository here. I'm just going to click OK. And notice there's a bunch of options here in Visual Studio. I'm just going to choose empty. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you how to get your web config if you don't know how to get it. And we're going to make some assumptions here that the one that they give us is going to be okay, right? And we'll talk about how to check this in a second. Because the basic project that you create with Visual Studio, remember when we're using Azure, you're actually using something called IIS in the background, Internet, which stands for Internet Information Services. That's being run by Microsoft Azure. That's the actual server, right? And here I have a web config. Yay, web config. What does it look like? It looks like this. Oh my gosh, like lots of stuff. System web, and you get a bunch of stuff there. Do I need all this stuff? Well, I do need a couple of things. I don't care about compilers. There's not going to be a compiler here with Visual C# and blah, blah. I don't need this code DOM thing, most likely, right? But I do need this configuration, and I probably need this, which is my XML version that I'm using. So a really quick thing to do would be to copy it all. So I'm going to Control A, even though I don't need it. Copy, Control C. Go back to Visual Studio Code, and what we're going to do is I'm going to make this, I'm going to rename this file, or I'm going to copy this file, and I'm going to paste in the same folder. Bear with me. Let's see what I'm talking about here in a second. Paste. There's webconfig1. Well, we'll leave webconfig1 in there, but we'll rename it instead of config, because that might be weird. I'm going to rename this file, just so we have a backup of this one, XML, because that's what it really is. So some XML file. Okay, we don't care. It's going to stay the same. Well, our web config file, I'm going to get the information from here and copy it as is. So it's not going to really be conformant. Oops. Erg. It's not going to be conformant to our web config for. I'll put this up on GitHub in a second. It won't conform to the stuff we're doing for Font Awesome, is what I'm trying to say. But it is a web config. Now, this isn't language C# or anything like this. Notice it says C#, CS, C#. I don't need C#. I definitely don't need VB. So for now, I mean, we could totally get rid of these things. But let's see what happens when I upload this version of the web config. Does it still give me an error? Does it stop working? Right? These are things to understand. So whenever you're fixing problems, this is one way to do it. So I'm going to say debugging web config. Okay, that's what we're doing. Put this up, go to here, push onto GitHub. It's gonna, when it pushes, by the time it does pushing, or it's done pushing, I can go back here on Azure, right, and take a look and see under deployment options if it has indeed deployed the changes, right? And I notice that there's only initial commit here, right? And it won't do anything until I see another commit with another check mark, and this one should be something else. So until I see that, and I can sync if I want to try and do that, that's taking an inordinate length of time, I'll be honest. Because up here on my commits, I should see 2 commits, not 1. Did I do something wrong? Yes. I may have done something wrong, but let's take a look and see if I've pushed to the right place. So here's comp, or less than 5. It hasn't gone up to GitHub somehow, right? I'm pretty sure I pushed, right? Because I went here, and then, oh, well, push 2, that's still there. But this is a problem you were having, right? So something maybe internet-wise in the room, because it shouldn't take that long. Like this, we should have our commit. I only have 1 commit here, and that's why it hasn't gone up to Azure. Where did it push? How do I know where it is? So I know this worked the first time, so I can always go here and go to git log, right? And I see that there's 2 commits locally, right? 2 commits, initial commit and debugging my web config. That's my second commit. Somehow, this didn't publish out. It's possible. It's possible. Unlikely that this stuff should happen. Like that's the first time it's ever happened to me like this. But it doesn't mean that for whatever reason, it didn't get to GitHub. And it's not going to get to GitHub. So as a quick fix and a test, what I like to do is always change 1 or 2 things. So I go back to my index.html, and you can add another comment in here, to test it with. So maybe I'll add another comment in here. So we'll say, testing web config. Right, I'll save it. Save. I'll have a new commit. I'll go here. I'll add it in, and I'll say another test. Web config. And this is my commits, right? Committed here and push. Did it? Crazy. That shouldn't be, right? Something's slow. Something's happening. So it's a web thing. It's not normally. This is not normally what happens ever. Something's happening in GitHub, right? Remember, GitHub is just a service offered by Amazon, right? So Amazon is the people that basically are the back end for GitHub, right? They use Amazon Web Services. All right, so I've kind of set up this second commit. And let's see now if I click onto it, if I only have 2. Well, that's okay. That's good enough to start with. That means on here, I should have my second one, right? Which means when I come back to my site, if I refresh, and if everything went well, then I'm good, right? So you see that web config worked. We know that worked because now I can see my site again, and I can go to projects, and I can go to contact me, and I can go back and forth, and it's using one page. Yay. However, that's not what I want. I don't want this to happen because on the bottom of my page, if you look at my inspect, and if I go down to the bottom on my console, you can see that I got a couple problems with Font Awesome. I want to fix this problem. That's the whole idea behind web config in the first place, right? So what to do? Well, leave everything the way it is. Yeah. Oh, it just says that it doesn't understand, you know, it may not work for some older browsers, right? So, and that's, I don't want a browser incompatibility issue, so I'm showing you how to fix it. So now I've got XML, this part, inside my system.web server, and I want to take this part here, copy it, and go back into my web config, and find a place that's outside of system.codedom, and it has to be away from system.web altogether, and then kind of paste it in, right? Oops, undo. I meant copy, and then somewhere in here, paste. Here we go. So this is the file extension part, right? So I've done this. Now I'll say updated. I'll go here. I'll say updated. This can take forever. Updated web.config. And then click the check mark and go here and push. So if everything goes well, like I said, then we have it on GitHub. But lately we've had some flakiness on GitHub. Let me see if I have my third one yet. Yes, I do, but not my fourth one. So I got to wait a little longer. It looks like there is a delay today for whatever reason between GitHub and interactivity, which is fine. It's not a big deal. And again, we just have to wait, be patient. You know, something going on the web today that's causing this to happen. Because GitHub is really like, usually rock solid and quick, right? And that's why it's happening. And you can also tell from a deployments perspective that these are the tests that I have. If there was another one, it would show up here on Microsoft Azure. But the big test is this next one, right? Because that's the one I want to figure out, right? So let's take a look at that again. So it's not here. Let's refresh. Still not here. That's a long time, right? It's a really long time. And notice the time frame, like 6 minutes. It's like 2 minutes per push, which is not, that's not the case at all. It's like a minute. It's like half a second, half a minute for it to do everything, right? Still not there. It's a lovely time on the internet today. There's an ice storm on outside, right? All over the place. And there's also an ice storm on the internet. It's really slow. See if it's going to change anytime soon. That's really weird. That's really strange. It's going slow, right? I bet you if you look it up, I bet you there's some people are already putting it up. Hey, how come GitHub is so slow? Guaranteed. If it happens to me, it's happening to everybody, right? So one more time. 4 commits. Yay! We got our commit here. Let's take a look at the deployments. There's my commit. It deployed. And now let's take a look and see if this still works by refreshing. Now, yay, and no errors. So what do? I just use a standard web config. Please use my folder from this week. Grab that web config. So whenever we work from now on, we'll have that big ugly web config, but it works. And I can pare it down later on. I'll try taking away C# and other things. You don't need all that stuff, but you definitely need that structure for your web config to work. Okay, good. So my web config is working. I've got my portfolio page, and I can switch between pages nicely. You know, those things are the things we wanted to get to on the same page. Recap. You need to have a Git repository for assignment 2, separate from assignment 1. Tonight is lab 2, which is just showing me that you started assignment 2. For the exam, you need both Git and some kind of cloud provider host or something like that you use, right? So that way, and that I can get to, okay? If I can't get to the host, like if it's something internal or if there's a box that's sitting inside your basement somewhere that you can get to, but I can't, that doesn't help me, right? It has to be something I can actually get to. Some people do that kind of thing. All right, so we're talking about events, and there's a couple things I can get rid of. First of all, if I look at my index.html or any one of these, on the bottom I have app.js, projects, right? I have app.js, contact, right? I have app.js. And in my app.js, now we don't need this closed app.js. That was just an example of how we did this. So I'm going to get rid of this. No more closed app. In my app.js, I have an IFE. There's my IFE. And I'm also using strict. What's use strict? What does that do? Who knows what use strict does? If I ask you a question on a quiz, that might happen, right? You should know these things. Why am I using use strict? Take a guess. Take a guess. Why do you think I'm using use strict? Yeah. The what? I need to have the var in the variable or the let. That's one reason. Another reason, it also tries to force you to use semicolons. All right, those are the two things. One of the things that you may have noticed when you did your assignment 1 is that JavaScript from the get-go does not like multi-line strings. I don't know if you noticed that. If you tried to do multi-line string on JavaScript, it gave you an error. It might have given you an error, right? If you didn't notice that, you should go check your assignment. But an example of this would be if I was in my projects page. Here's my project page. Notice that I did my HTML content in my, so this is like, here's my home page, and then here's my projects page, and I don't have any comment, but in my home page, I have this area that says, let my contact, it was a sunny day in Florida. Now, if I take this contact, this content, here's my content, and I split this up between 2 lines just by doing this. So I have my 1 semicolon, but I take this and go like this. Split it up. JavaScript will complain. It'll be like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I don't understand, it's going to say. However, there is a workaround with ECMAScript 2016. We've been using let and const, right? We talked about this, but they also have a new symbol that we can use instead of single quote and double quote, and it is the backtick symbol, right? Backtick can be located just underneath the escape key where the tilde is. If you look at your keyboard, and if you look at the escape key on the keyboard, the top left of your keyboard, there is a little symbol underneath that. There's a little tilde. It looks like a wavy line. Underneath that symbol, there's a little tick. It goes the other way. That's backtick. And if you replace these ones with backtick, it looks different. Look, it looks like this, right? It doesn't look up and down. It almost like a slant. It looks like a slant, right? So you want to take this and put it here, and all of a sudden, what it does is it creates multi-line comments. Nice, right? Multi-line text. If I save this, and if I run it inside of my light server, so here's my project. I'm going to go light-server and kick it off so I can see what this live page will look like. It was a sunny day in Florida. It felt great. I love the sun, right? That was my line. And if I go back to my code here, you can see that it's multi-line, but it's interpreting it as 1 line. This is useful because sometimes people get confused, by making, multi-line comments. The backtick is something new in ECMAScript 2016. It's a new thing in JavaScript we got to talk about. The other thing I did, you may have done, is inject values by using the plus operator, right? You can inject values by using the plus operator. We talked about this from a string perspective. Here's an example, console.info, page title, and then document title, right? So remember, console.log or console.info or console.error or one of those console commands, it needs, if I hover over it, a string, a message of type string typically, right? If not, it'll give you it'll output the object. So if I want to make this a whole string, instead of doing page title plus, I can use something called string interpolation, right? And there is string interpolation. Just to show you what that is, if I go to string, it's spelled like this, interpolation in JavaScript, right? Let's look that up for you. And then it's called literals, template literals. This is a new thing, right? You can see that I have a backtick. There's my backtick. And then look, I have a $sign and a curly brace, right? And this syntax allows me to inject data inside of my string without using the plus operator, right? So if I go back, I can use the back tick. So back tick instead of the double quotations or quotation marks, right? And instead of closing it off here, I can just kind of go in here, put $, open curly brace, right? And then close curly brace, and then the back tick again, right? And if I've done things correctly, not the single quotes, but the back tick, then I have something that looks like this. And this is string interpolation. Okay, string interpolation. So there's my save. And if you notice, it should say my page title on the console. And if I go back to my page, which is the one I've been working with, right, this one. And if I look at inspect, I still see in the bottom, in console, my page title and whatever the document title is, right? So that's really cool, the fact that it does that, right? So it's not, I don't have to use the plus operator. Plus operator is concatenation. That's what the system is, the words are called, right? Where I concatenate. I take one string and something else. When I smash them together, out comes a string again, right? That's not the same as what I'm doing here in my code. This is not concatenation. This is interpolation. That's a totally different thing, where I'm injecting the value right here, directly in there, okay? This is very common nowadays. This is the new way we do things with JavaScript, and that's why I'm bringing it up to you. I will try and do this method of interpolation with backtick instead of single quote, double quote from now on in the course, okay? If I don't do it, let's see if you can remind me. Tom, don't use concatenation, use interpolation. See what happens. All right, so some things about that. And there's other areas here I'm sure you can find in my code that uses that plus operator to do that. Here's an example of that. Look, let my HTML content be this, but it's far better to use backtick here again. So I can do something like this. I can go backtick, oops, right? And then surround this whole thing with backticks, right? And then get rid of the quotations. I kind of really look and see what it looks like for some kind of template string, right? Template looks much easier this way. And I can spread it over 2 lines as opposed to the way I had it before. And again, it doesn't change anything, right? So if I go to second heading, this is an inner paragraph, right? So if I was to see that, you can see it's still doing that, no problems. I don't have any errors down here. And I'm using string interpolation, okay? All right, but we're talking about something else today, and it's kind of calling user events, right? So we want to talk about things like how to attach an event. We've already done events. One of our things we did was buttons, right? We have a button event, and we're actually, this is related to your assignment number 2 because we talked about how to disable the default or, kind of behavior, right? We want to prevent default behavior in the button in order for us to do your assignment 2. That's what we want. Or else what's going to happen is when you press submit, it's going to clear the screen and you're going to lose all your data, right? And that will not satisfy the requirements. Right? So we're going to talk about mouse and keyboard events a little bit, and then we can talk a little bit about touch and orientation events for mobile, but we'll probably just do a glancing blow there. The 2 I really care about right now for this course is these 2, attaching an event and mouse and keyboard events. So and this is really wordy. I'm not going to go read this whole thing, but I will. You can use it again. This is all for you as a reference. Again, the idea is when we talk about events, we talk about them being triggered. Right? So think about JavaScript and the DOM, the document object model, right? And how events get raised. Okay, I want to talk about these words with you. So when you hear them in other lingo, or if you read them online, then you've heard me talk about them. So it's not like some language you haven't heard before, right? So when we click on a button, we can say that we raise an event. An event is raised, right? You can also say an event is emitted, an event message. The message of the event, all right, I'm sending a signal, and that signal for the event is being triggered or emitted. You can say these things, right? When an event is triggered, it's usually because we've set together 2 parts to the event, right? One is somehow I've created a hook. Remember I talked about hooking into the document? I've created a reference or a hook. Like hook is the easier way to think about it, right? Hooked into the document, right? And when I've done that, I've created this reference. That's the first thing. I need to kind of have some kind of way of connecting my button on the page with my code in my JavaScript page, right? So two different things. And I do that by using normally document.getElementById. That's one of the ways we do it, okay? There's other ones you can use. Instead of document.getElementById, you can use document.getElementsByClassName, elements, which means multiple elements. And there's reasons for that, right? But if I want to connect with one button, the easiest way is to connect to it with some kind of ID. You create an ID for the button, right? And then you make that, that connection. So to illustrate this, right, let's suppose we have a few pages here, and I have my index page, here it is, right, with one button. I have my projects page, right, and I have my contact page. Now we did some work on the contact page last week, so I'm going to leave this one alone. But I want to talk about my projects page, right? My projects page right now has this image, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a series of buttons underneath the image, a series of them. Every time I click the button, it's going to do different things. Okay, we're going to see what it does with the image. Okay, maybe it'll make the image smaller or bigger, right? We can do that. Special effects, right? So we'll see what happens with that. So let's create the buttons. Now remember that the image is here, and we have a class of row, and so we want to make another row of buttons independent of the image, right? So the way we do it in Bootstrap is we say div tag with a class of row, right? Dot means class. Here's the shorthand. We do a div tag with a class of column dash medium, which is just a 12-column grid, offset. We're going to match up what it says up here, -4, and then column dash medium dash 4, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to set up inside of there a series of buttons, right? I want a bunch of buttons all in a row, right? So how much do I want to give each of the buttons? If I want them to be spaced out properly, and if I have 4 columns, right? I have 4 columns. Do I want to make this 4? Think about this. I have 12 columns on my grid, 12 columns, right? The first 4 columns are empty. And then I have 4 more columns. I'm going to put 4 buttons in place. What should I do? 1 column per button. That's what I should do, right? So how do I do that to make it look right? And it's going to be on the same row, right? So the same row, I'm going to have different buttons. So I can't do this all the time. It can't be, all of them can't be 4, because that means they'll be all in the same spot. If I want them to be centered inside their own column, each one button, 1 column, if I wanted to do that, then I would say something like this. So medium 1 for the first button, right? Inside there would be a button, right? And it would look like this, right? So I have my button, right? Here's my div tag. This is all one row. Anything that's in here is a row, right? That row. Here's another row up here, the row for the image. And in here, notice that I have the same offset. Offset means space before on the left-hand side. That's what it means. There's 4 columns I have on the left. Here, that's what offset means. And then I have 4 columns on the left up here for my image, right? So image, and then I have my little button. I'm going to take away this paragraph for now because I want to get rid of this paragraph so we can see the buttons and not the paragraph. Let's just get rid of it, just from a demonstration perspective. It's not because I couldn't do this with a paragraph. All right, good. So now I have this button, and I want to put other buttons. Well, guess what? I mean, the great thing is I can continue to make different columns in here. As long as it adds up to 12, I can do that, right? So column medium offset 4 with 1 column. That's the first one. And then I want the other ones to be 1 column at a time, right? So we got to think about this. This is in the same row. Okay, so if I kind of take this and then copy it. Now wait, first of all, what I want to try and do is this. I want to kind of give it an ID. So my ID for this button is, you know, we'll say for this one is button 1, or we'll call it something that would make sense. The first button that I want to put on my page is the button that hides the image. The image is going to be hidden, okay? So we'll say, we'll call this the hide button. Okay, that's this button. And we'll say hide, right? Button. Okay, it doesn't do anything. There's no special effects. One thing that I want to also put in is the class of the button. We know that Bootstrap has some really cool classes we can tap into. So we can say class is equal to button, right? Button dash default. So default's kind of button, right? And to see this in action, before we make the other one thing I like to do is test. So I want to save it like this and see the effect immediately on the screen. So I'm going to go back to the screen and go back to my projects, and I should see, close off for now, I should see this and a button. Is that what I wanted? It's kind of no space, right? I want to kind of have a space or something like that between the two. And there's ways I can do this. I mean, there's a row, here's another row, but the button is right here, right? I could decide to make this image a little bit smaller, but I need some space between the two. What would you recommend? Huh? I could put it in a container, right? That means that we not only have a row, right? This is a row, and this is a row. First heading and second. Look how close it is. First heading's here, and then here's my image, and then my button's like right here. It's like so close, right? My hide button. So we could use CSS to do that. We can push it off, give it a little space, or like you said, I can give it a bit of a container. So I can say something like div with a class of container, right? I could do that. Give me a little bit more space, and then I can put all this, right, in here. What does container do? It actually gives us a little bit more margin. You got to be very careful here. When I go back, right, you can see that it didn't really do anything. I'll just move this button over a little bit. It didn't really unattach these two things. They're kind of the same row, right? So this did absolutely nothing for me, right? So I can take it out. What else? We could be cheesy about it if you really want to. Could be cheesy about it and add in some kind of line break, right? We could do this. We could say, well, you know what? I want a line break or some kind of horizontal rule, which is really old school. We should use something else, right? What should we use instead of this? Oops. What should we use instead of a horizontal rule? Because this is what this is. It makes a little line, right? And that gives us the kind of break. But it kind of goes from one end to the other. What else could we do instead of this? We could use a span, right? We could use some kind of span or div tags. We could use a div tag with a, you know, a class of, some kind of class of a border, right? Could do that. Here's my div with a class of border. And by the way, the other thing is this: does my main content, if my main content, is it containing, like you notice I have a div tag here, and then I have a row here, right? But I don't have a row down here, right? One of the challenges when you have a lot of divs like this, right? It's like a row is within a row. That's a big issue. And that might be the problem right now. The way I've configured this, I have 1, 2, 3 opening tags in this opening tag hell, right? And then I have 1, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have 1, 4, 5, 6, woo, 7. That's a lot of div tags, right? So I may have put too many div tags in here, right? Div tag to div tag. This one is the row. So how do I fix this problem? Because this is my nav, right? And I have a div tag that's somewhere down here. This is my bottom nav, right? And I have this one. So this one here is, usually what I do is kind of put in some comments. That's how I do it. I go, because something's messed up here with my layout. That's why it's doing the way with what it's doing. So let's get rid of this first. Fix layout problems, always do this, right? So this is my div tag for the column medium offset 4, right? So I can copy this whole class. Usually I take the class definition that I got here. I copy it, and I paste it inside my comments, and I kind of end it off. So I know what this is. This is the one from my column medium offset 4, right? My first row. And this is another row, so I can put this in. So this is my row. We cannot get this confused. So this div closes off this row. This div closes up this column, right? These navs, I can do the same thing with those. You got a problem here, though. This is kind of weird, right? Something's going on, right? Where this shouldn't be like this. So we know this is a container, and the container should really be outside of our entire container object, which is not right now. Right now, this one over here, you can see is free, and so is this footer. We should have a container that goes down here at the bottom somewhere, and it should end up the container, right? So let's fix this problem, right? I have my div tag, and I'm going to close off the container for a second. Watch what I'm going to do to fix it. So div. And this div class is, again, if I put comments in here, container, right? So I'm going to have a lot of these containers. You can also call them other things. Instead of divs, you can use the size or main would be a good thing to do. I've got a class of row, And this one is column medium offset 3, column 6. We'll do the same thing. So we'll say alum, and we'll take these classes, and copy them and paste them over here. Inherit issues, right? And then we need to close this off, this row. So we're going to close out. Don't worry about this stuff. I'll fix this in a second. I'll close off this row. Right? So let's say, again, this div tag of a row that's being closed. And I don't care about all this right now. All I care about is that these two divs, this div is closing this div is closing this div is closing this div, right? So this is the one for the column medium offset 4 and 4, right? So we see what, and usually what it is what I like to do is, oops, I like to put in just everything that's before it. I can see what it is, and then that way I'm not confused when it comes to closing off all these things, like closing curly braces if you're a coder, right? I find that this is just easier syntax, just to start doing this kind of stuff, these little comments, right? That's what they mean. All right, so we got our everything closed now, but we have this container, and I want to take this container, I want to cut it, and I'm going to put it way at the bottom, so everything is inside my container, which is what it should be in the first place, right? Now that changed my layout. My layout looks like this. It's a little different, right? You may not know, but I've just realigned everything, and I still have this problem. So that's the first thing I want to do. Is it within my container? Now, next. Now that I've fixed it and I've kind of put everything in parts and I've got some spacing in here, so you can see there's a space between each row. There's row 1, there's another row, there's a bunch of rows, right? And each row of data has different sizes, right? Now I can put in some kind of another div tag, or you can use a span, doesn't matter. Like I said, with the class of some kind of divider, we'll call it divider. I don't have a class of divider. I call it border or divider. And then I can target this class, yeah, with my custom CSS, right? So I have a CSS on the page, right? There is no divider there. But what I want to do is a couple things. One, I can go to my CSS. So here's my thing here. And then we haven't used this yet, but I will. My CSS just gives me padding. But what I also want it to do is say something like this. I want to target my divider. Right, here's my divider. And what do I want to do? I want to give a little bit of room. So I want to kind of have a margin or some kind of thing on the top, 10 pixels, something to divide that up, right? So where my margin top is equal to something like 10 pixels, right? So let's see what that does first. Does it do anything? Yeah, it does, right? Just space it out right there. Take a look, right? Give me a little bit of space. If I don't think that's enough, I can always change that to 15, because maybe I want to put a horizontal rule in there. I can do that. I can say border, right? If I can spell. Border is 1 pixel solid black, right? I can do that too. And you can see I got this big line. That's really big. Look at that massive line there. It's crazy, right? Maybe I want margin top, bottom, right? Well, what's that? Remember? Box model, right? Top, right, bottom, left, right? Top and bottom, right and left. So top and bottom is, let's say, 10 pixels or 15 pixels. Right and left can be 0. I don't want any margin. And if I do that, I get a little bit of this, or maybe it's the other way around. If I do the other way around, oh, this is margin top. Haha. I meant to do this margin. Right, so gives me a little line, and I want to make this line smaller. It's going to be only in here, right? In here, it's easy. I can use my Bootstrap stuff for that, right? I don't have to tell it how big it is. I can go in here, and whatever row it's in, so I'm in my projects, whatever row it's in, if it's in a row, I can assign a column medium offset in there as well. So I can give it its own. So I can kind of do that. It's a little bit overkill, but I could do this. I could say row, inside of there it's div for the class of, because I want to make them the same, column dash medium dash offset dash 4 with the column dash medium dash 4. Right, and I can take this little class divider and cut it and put it in there. A little cleaner with CSS. We're using CSS all over the place. And I can say this is my divider. All right, oops. Slider. And then maybe I can use this over and over again, right? I can kind of copy paste, different places. And you can see now that it's a little line. Oh man, what the hell? How come it's here, but the picture is so big, right? Picture's big because it's outside of the margins, right? It's outside of the line. It's so big that it's not, my width has to be the size of my container. But yeah, so I could do that. I can make it so that with images, I want them to be responsive. Like right now, if I do something like this, see that the image doesn't shrink, right? It stays the same size. And so does this. Look at this. What happens is this gets really stretchy, right? Because of the way I've made my line, right? And if I come down to here, it keeps on moving, like changing the size until it comes to here, right? But my image always stays outside of it. There's a fix for this in Bootstraps. If I go getbootstrap.com, and if I go to CSS, I mean, I can do it with my own CSS too, but I'm trying to get you to use Bootstrap, right? That there is, on the CSS side, there's images, right? And if you go down, it says responsive images, right? And the class is image-responsive. I can kind of put that inside the image tag, right? So copy it, go back inside the image, right? I can put a class, right? Which is, I can put it in front or anywhere else. Image class is responsive. And then that should make a difference in terms of my size. Look at that, right? See how it sits nicely in there now? Because my image is responsive, right? And then if I kind of do this, you can see that it changes size a little bit, right? That's pretty cool. And it doesn't stretch my stuff out, and it gives me that little line that I want. Image is responsive, right? Okay, cool. So what I want to do is when I go down here and I click hide, this is my first effect. I want my image to be hidden, right? That's my first one. But I want to put all my buttons in a row, right? Now, again, the simplest way to do that would just put buttons all in a row. That would be the thing. But I want to space them out. And I want to show you how to use this layout here a little bit. So this is my first button, and we can do that. This is the hide button. So we'll make another little annotation. So here's the hide button. Come on, Tom. Hide button, right? And we're just going to take this whole hide button and copy it. This is inside my, now this is the row. Now see this hide button, actually I should do this, cut. This is this part. So I want to use the same row this time, not a different row, right? Same row, but I want to add to it, right? So I want to kind of add in there. So I want to take this button, I want to copy it and put it in there. And what I want to do is instead of my column medium offset of 4, I want my column medium offset to be, now you got to be careful here what we do. All I need is to make this a column medium of 1, right? If we did this correctly, then this next button, which is my, 50% button, right? And maybe I want to call it 50. I cannot start with a, we'll call it the half size button, right? This will be called the half size button. And inside here, we'll say 50%, right? Let's see what happens when I do that. Well, there it is, right? It kind of puts it right next to it, nice and even, right? Okay, so 50%. And so hide 50%, maybe 75%. We'll do 75%, and then 100%, and maybe show. So hide 50, 75, and show. Let's do that. So we'll do the other button. So half size button. And we'll do this one. This is the 3/4 size. Big thing. 3/4 size button. There we go. 3/4 size button. I'll take that whole word, put that in as the ID. 3/4 size button. And maybe we'll make this 75%. Right, 75%. And we'll still give it a, a 1. By the way, this shouldn't be this. This should be this, right? So all I'm doing is adding just one column. And now that I've set the offset here, because this is all in the same row, it has to add up to 12, right? So I've got 4 here, plus 1 is 5, right? Plus 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. I got one more, 8. I can keep going all the way to 12. but I only allocated 4 columns for the middle, so I don't want to go more than 4 in the middle, so 4 buttons, right? All right, so 3/4 size hide button, and we'll do the other one. Here's the other one. Instead of 3/4 size, we'll do, we'll do something like show button. Hide and the show, right? So we'll call this a show button. They do different things, all the buttons, right? And we'll make this, we'll call it just show. Hide, show. All right, so hide, let's make it a different color. So when we hide the button, we'll make it a yellow color. And the way to do that is in the button itself, the class default, that's the color, right? We can make this so that it is warning, right? And this one will be primary. And these ones will just be defaults. So now what it looks like on the screen is this. Controls. We're kind of pulling them up really quickly. All right, so my effect, I want whatever it says on the button here to do what it's supposed to do. So let's do the hide first. Can someone help me? Can you do the hide for me? How do we do the hide? What do I need to do from a CSS perspective to hide the image? What? Display none, right? Okay. Let's try it out. So on the code side, and then we'll take a break after this. On the code side, if I go to app.js, I need to be able to target the buttons. Remember I talked about the first step, and this is inside my projects page. Notice I'm in the case, in this switch case statement. In the projects area, right, I've got a bunch of things. I got my variables. We're going to get rid of all these. We're going to clean this up, in fact, right? Because this doesn't make any sense. These are just all tests we did, right? So we don't need that. We have actually no control. So we're just going to get rid of all this stuff in here because we don't need it. One thing I do want, though, is inside my projects, I need some hooks for the buttons. Okay. What are the 2 ways that you can think of that I can get all references to the buttons? I could do them. I could do them one at a time. I could say something like this way. I could say something like let, my hide button, right, equals to document.getElementById, right, and then hide button. I could do it this way, right? So this is one way, right? And I could do the same things for the other ones. Let's just do them. So we'll look at the first case. Okay. Hide button, and then down here, this one will be the show button because we want to kind of keep, the same. Right? It's a lot of same commands over and over again, right? And these ones will be the half size button, I think it is. Half size button. Check. So again, if I go to my projects, half size button and 3/4 size button. There we go. Half size button. And 3/4 size button. 3/4 size button. Ooh, very large. I did it on purpose. Let's see why. Okay, cool. Got my buttons. And then I need to set up event handlers for each of them, right? So first, step 1, whenever we talk about events, set up, step 1, set up references to all to the elements you need to hook into, right? That's what I'm doing here. I'm setting references, which is what these things are. So now my variables, hide button, half size button, 3/4 size button, and show button, they're all references to these actual user interface elements inside the page. Step 2, right? I need to, and this is now, we're going back to events. I need to register an event. Okay, that's what they're called. Register or bind an event. That's what they're called. Either you might hear them as event binding or event registration. Okay, if I register an event, I'm actually registering an event listener. Okay, and remember, the way I do that is I have to reference the item, right? So step 2, set up event listeners, or register event listeners. right? For each button. Okay, in this particular case, or it could be any object, whatever element you want to, for each element, we'll call it, because we want to hook into these elements. It could be other elements. It could be an H1 tag. It could be something else on the screen. Anything that you display on the screen, you can hook into, okay? Whatever it is. Nav bars, H1 tags, paragraph tags, anything that has an element on the screen, you can hook into. All right, pretty much. And then we'll say something like this. So I can say hide button dot add event list. Remember I told you this is the preferred way. There's other ways. Then the type of event, so click, a click event, right? And what I want to say is when someone clicked on this button, right, I want to do an anonymous function that's inline. Here's my anonymous function. This part right here is called the callback function, right? So this is the event listener, this part. And this part here is the event handler, right? So listening means I'm listening for the event loop. Inside the event loop, there's an event loop, right? I'm listening. And then the event handler, when the event is triggered, whatever event I'm listening for, in this case, I'm only listening for click events. I can listen for a lot of different kind of events. But for this button, I'm only listening for click events. The rest of the events, I'm ignoring. I don't care about the other events. I only care about click events right now, right? And I have to have a response. My response is this callback. It's called an anonymous function or callback because it's not, doesn't have a name on it. It just has the word function. These curly braces, anything inside these curly braces will be executed upon listening or hearing this event, this click event, the hide button click event. If it's raised, it'll respond with this callback, whatever this callback tells me to do, this function. Now I could write it in line here, but a lot of times you might see it being written like this, right? Like over a couple of lines. Why? Because it's easier to see. So I could do something like, let's do the first button. I could say, well, when I click on the button, I want the image to hide. Hold on a second. Do I have access to the image right now? No, right? I need to hook into it again. I need to hook into anything I want to control on the page. I need to be able to hook into somehow, whether it's temporary or permanent. And what I mean by temporary is I could do it, one time, or I can do it with a named variable, right? I need to create a reference, right? So the other one I need is I want to have some kind of, first of all, did I name the image? Let's take a look at this, right? So if I go back to my index.html, remember projects.html, it's structure is everything, right? If you don't have good structure, who cares? My image class is responsive. The source is lorem pixel, blah, 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 but I got nothing. I need to have some kind of way of hooking into this. I could hook into this by class, but that means every image that has this class will be affected, right? I only want individual images to be affected, which means I need some kind of ID. For now, I'm just going to get rid of this alt tag, and I'll split this over a couple of lines. Doesn't care, and I'll say ID is, right? This will be my first project image, first project image. That's the ID. Now you can make it whatever you want. But this image is the first project image, right? Cool. Now that I have a name in HTML, I can control it in JavaScript. I can say first project image is equal to document.getElementByID, and then first project image, right? There we go. Now I have a hook. I can do something with it. So now inside this function, I have control, right? I can't get control of my elements on screen unless I have some kind of reference. And these variables are references to all of my elements on the screen. Yes? Can I name it? Yes, I can. No, I can't do a light in here, but I could create a separate. I could do a separate function, a named function where I call from in here. We'll do that separate. We'll do that another time. Hold on. So for now, you're ahead of me. So for now, what I want to do is I want to do something like this. I want to say my first project image, right? Here's my first project image, dot. Can I do hidden? That's a property, a hidden property, right? What does this do? Hidden is equal to, can I set it to true? Can I do that? Is that a way of doing it? So it's a Boolean. It tells me I can hide. Can I show? Right? What does it do? Right? Well, if I click the image now, it doesn't do anything. None of these work either. So this didn't work. This click event, of course, but I'm showing you that. Well, like I said, this is first project image, right? This is my first project image, but I want to hide the image. Do I want to hide the image? So, but this isn't the way to do it, right? The way to do it is first project image dot style, right? Dot, and you know, I want to show this. Now, is it hidden or is it visible or display? Display, right? Is equal to none. That's the way to do it. Display none. So if I click on this button now, it should take away my image. Now, I can't get it back unless I click show, but I don't have that button working. Hide and show, right? And I'm using two different buttons first so I can show you two different effects, but there's another way to do it with one button, of course, right? So let's do another one. So we'll say, and we'll stop for break. Okay, so we'll do this one. Instead of the hide button, you know, with a click event, we'll do the show button. This is kind of repeating, right? Show button event listener function, and now we'll say visibility block, right? Is that the way it has to be? Block visibility? Let's see what happens. So hide, show. Hide, show. That works, okay, right? Kind of messing with my layout. That's not the effect that I want, right? Nice idea, Tom, but I don't want that. I want the image to be replaced with something else. That's what I want, right? I want the image to be replaced with something else that doesn't show the image, right? Okay. And if I show it, are these buttons exclusive? Like, for example, my 50%, can I miss the, you know, kind of show the image at 50% of size without killing my layout? Because my layout should never change, right? I don't want my image to, you know, my layout to change. I just want my image to be smaller, right? That's a different scenario. For now, let's accept the fact that when I say show, it shows it. When I go hide, it hides it. And I want to do my 50% and 75%. How do I do that? That's a different thing. And then we'll stop. So here's my buttons. Here's the first one. And here's the second one. I'm just copying them. Here's the half size button. You can see what I'm doing here. And here's the 3/4 size button. And that's what here. There we go. It's all the same stuff, man. Okay, what about display now? This isn't a display issue. What do I do with my half size button? Yes.
Good way to do it, or should we like have 2 or 10 IDs and just switch the IDs?
Lots of ways to do it.
Yeah, we might be most.
I'll show you in a second. First, we have to do the long, ugly way first. All right. Always do the long, ugly way and then reduce. Right? Because everyone knows how to. Then at least you know the long, ugly way. Right? If I give you the short way, people are like, "Holy crap! Why is he doing that?" Right? I don't want that. All right. Let's do the next one. So the half size button. What do I really want? I want the size to be 50%. Is it the size, the height, the width? What do I want to be 50%? Huh? Width. Okay. So that means the style dot width. Right? Can I do style dot width? Can I do style dot width? Wait a minute. I don't see it here. Style border width, maximum width. Oh, maximum width. Max width, right, is equal to 50%. Right? Let's try it out first. We always try out first and see what happens. Max width 50%. Oh, here we go. Hide. Show. Still not 100%. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What do I mean there? So do I mean show and go to 100%? I think so, right? So that means that this one should be not just this, but I should kind of take this piece here and go to my show, because we want to kind of make everything almost like a reset, right? My show will be max width is equal to 100%. We see this now, right? And then for my 3/4 size button, we'll just do one of these and replace this with 75%. And then we have kind of an idea of different functions. They do different things, very simple things, but they're different things. Now, if I go here and I go hide, shows everything, 50%, 75%, 100%, right? Are we good? Totally illogical. But the thing is, it's just, all we're doing, max width means max, it'll fill. Remember what we're trying to do is we're doing responsive this way. Because if I was to go to a specific size, like 100%, so this is like full 100%, right? Notice the button stack now. That's a different thing. That's got to be fixed too, right? But if I hide, that works. 50%, what happened? Well, it's hidden. Show 50%, 75% of this current screen. But if I go to here, right, it changes. It's responsive, right, depending on what the size of my screen is, right? That's why we use the responsive image, right? This is wrong, though. This is wrong. We can fix this with another set of classes. We're not going to do it now. All right, so again, I want to go 100%. There's my stuff there. And again, we've got some very basic functionality here. In fact, like you said, it's probably illogical, right, to some degree. But we want to show different buttons because I'm trying to show different events. Okay. And that's what the whole scope of this thing was. Are we good with the stuff so far? Please tell me if you have a problem with anything we've talked about so far. Right? Because if you have, I know it might seem simple to some, but there's a lot of code that we're doing here. A lot of code for simple buttons. And it's kind of, it makes me crazy, right? Isn't there a way we could make this so it's a little bit sexier? I hate to use that word, but something that's nicer. I know, I gotta shock you a little bit when I say that, but my clients always ask me to do things. Give me a sexy web page. Don't just give me a regular web page. Regular web pages look boring. And I'm like, explain what you mean, because I don't understand what that means. That can mean a lot of different things, bad things too, right? So get them to explain what you mean. What I mean by that, when I say that weird word, which I'm joking around, by the way, what I mean by it is it needs to be a little bit bang, boom, bam. It needs something that make a little bit nicer from a code perspective. It needs to be slicker. It needs to be more efficient, is what I'm saying. This code here is completely inefficient, right? Well, it does what it's supposed to do, what I've asked it to do, right? And it's pretty good, but I'm affecting CSS. That's what I'm doing. I'm actually triggering CSS effects on all of my buttons, my size. That's why I'm changing the size of the buttons and everything else. That's how I'm doing it, number one. But the second thing is I'm repeating myself. That's the problem. And one of the first principles of programming is the dry principle. Right? Always remember the dry principle, which is don't repeat yourself, right? If you don't have that dry principle in place, and it's one of the solid principles, one of the main principles we always talk about in programming. If you're repeating yourself, it gives rise to the need for a method or some kind of function that I could plug into, right? One function to rule them all, just like, you know, the Lord of the Rings, right? You know, one function to rule them, right? And if we have one function, we save a bunch of this, a bunch of duplication, lots of lines of code. Less lines of code on the web means speedier website. That's what it means, 100% of the time. Yes?
I have a question about what we were doing last week with consolidating all of our JavaScript files into one.
Yeah.
If what you're saying there, is that a bad thing for bandwidth if you're going to do what we did this assignment, where we have
one per one? Yeah, it's not good to have one website to do, one JavaScript file per each page. Doesn't make sense, right? Especially if you're duplicating, right? One JavaScript file would be enough to control lots of pages, right? If you do the right, and I've shown you one way of doing it. There's many other ways, right? Like the one I'm showing you here is just one method, right? With switch cases, but there could be others. All right, let's take a pause, and when we come back, we'll fix this problem. We'll fix all these crazy elements that we're doing, and maybe there's another way of doing this. Maybe another way that makes sense.